Hey guys, it's JD from JDTechGear and welcome back to the channel where we discuss PC passion, tech reviews, unboxings, and setup design. So if you're into that sort of thing, consider subscribing and checking out the rest of the channel. So this is the Windale 6, the bigger and stealthier brother to the Windale 4. Now I reviewed the Windale 4 a while back in my video, the Aim 4 Cooler Showdown, and it was a very impressive entry. The installation process was not very smooth, but other than that, it was very quiet and kept my Ryzen 1400 cool. I still highly recommend that cooler. The Windale 4 is priced competitively at $33 alongside the Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo. The Windale 6 is the next best thing. It features a larger fin design and ups the amount of heat pipes from 6 on the Windale 4 to 12 on the Windale 6. The heat pipes are in direct contact with the CPU package and are copper, while the block is aluminum. The price is about $7 to $10 up from the Windale 4, coming in at $40. Now there are two versions of the Windale 6. One has a normal fan and the other has a soft blue LED that is $44, which is the one I have. There's no performance difference, obviously, well, except for the fact that LEDs add FPS. Anyways, just like the Windale 4, it is identically packaged and packaged well. These are all the accessories included with the Windale 6. It has support for Aim 4 out of the box, which is nice. The cooler looks fantastic in my opinion. I love the matte black finish on the fins and the neutral color of the fan. Some say the fan is ugly, but personally I don't think so. To me, it is plain and plain for a reason, to suit more color themes due to its monochromatic nature. Of course, you could always replace the fan with another 120mm fan, but this one is quite silent. Anyways, the fan is not pre-installed to the cooler. To install the fan, I recommend doing so after the cooler is already mounted onto the motherboard. There are several rubber mounts with a few to spare, which is nice to have as backup. Basically, you just run the rubber mount through the fan with the head of the mount going into the fins on the cooler, and the little stick side sticks out of the frame of the fan. There's a side of the head with a tab, and that's the side that faces outward. So this way you'll still have the ability to pull the head of the rubber mount on the cooler without trying to rip the rubber mount apart. It's still pretty tricky when it comes to installing it inside the case because you have to reach around and push the head of the rubber mounts into the fins. The rest of the mounting process is okay. It's a bit tricky, but after doing it a few times, I started understanding it better, but it's still a pain to install. For Aim 4 installation, there are 4 pins that will go through the back of the motherboard through the provided backplate. Make sure the motherboard is standing up while you do this, otherwise it's near impossible to try and install the pins without them falling back out of the motherboard if it's not on its side. I'll recommend installing 1 pin at a time, otherwise they'll start falling out on you. Take one of the screw-on posts and make sure to screw it down onto one of the pins. Once you have all 4 installed, you can now install the braces that go over the post. The braces only allow for 2 possible directions of the cooler, and the cooler only faces up or down, which some may see as a drawback, but it doesn't affect airflow to the cooler. Just watch Kyle's video if you don't believe me. Now you'll notice there isn't much thread to work with to screw onto the cap, and 9 times out of 10 there's always one cap that won't be able to catch a thread. If this happens, go to the back of the motherboard and make sure the pin is completely flush against the motherboard and screw down the post on whatever distance you just pushed through the motherboard. Don't be afraid to push hard either, because that's what I had to do. Once all the caps are installed, take the cooler and place the mounting brace onto the top of the aluminum block. There are 2 notches on the top which affix the cooler into place, then place the cooler on top and screw the cross brace into place. This part is really tricky. Don't screw down one side too far. Go back and forth between both sides to screw it down as equally as possible on both sides. Also, don't worry if the holes on the cross brace and the mounting brace don't line up perfectly. It will work itself out with some finesse and screwing around with it for 10 minutes. Finally, once that is finished, install the fan. Like I said earlier, the fan is also tricky if the cooler is inside a case, but make sure to have those tabs sticking out once the head of the rubber mount is installed. So yeah, it's a tricky installation. I'm assuming you're not swapping coolers frequently though, so once it's installed. Regardless, the installation is a bit tricky and worthy of consideration because of it. So how quiet is the fan? If I'm not mistaken, the fan is the same fan that is used in the Windale 4 with the exception that it has a blue LED. I plugged the fan into a fan hub directly connected to the power supply with no motherboard, so it was running at its maximum speed. It was hovering around 50 decibels, which is really not bad at a max RPM of around 1580. It does well. Keep in mind the audible level of the room of testing is 39 decibels, which is pretty quiet. Here's what the fans sound like at max speed, load, and idle, and keep in mind the case fans are louder than the CPU fan during idle. Now let's see how it cools. For the test bench, it will be inside the Raid Max Sigma case to help represent a real world scenario. The Raid Max Sigma has great airflow, so that won't hinder the performance of the cooler as much as other cases with no ventilation in the front. The Ryzen 1400 is being used for the testing, and at stock speeds of 3.2 GHz under load and at a stock fan curve, it was at 40 degrees Celsius. Compared to the Windale 4, it's a degree and a half warmer, which you might be saying, well, that's just completely useless. But keep this in mind, the fan is running at a significantly slower speed at 860 RPM versus the Windale's 1112 RPM. Also, it's hard to regulate temperature inside the testing room. I tried keeping it the same as much as possible in both scenarios, so there can be a margin of error there. Kicking up the heat, I ran the 1400 at 3.9 GHz and during load ran at 55 degrees Celsius versus the 54.5 degrees Celsius on the Windale 4. Again, the Windale 4 is slightly cooler at a stock fan setting. Overclocking the Ryzen 1400 has narrowed the gap between the cooling efficiency of the Windale 6 and Windale 4. I ran these tests several times as the results do slightly baffle me. The Windale 6 has twice the amount of heat pipes and a larger fin design. But while overclocking doesn't seem to offer too much over what the Windale 4 already offers. Regardless, in both cases, the Windale 6 demonstrated better and slightly better cooling efficiency when compared to its little brother. This does show that the Windale 6 dissipates heat better. Also, the price is only $7 more than the Windale 4, and yes, at stock speeds, the Windale 6 runs slightly hotter. But if the RPM is matched for both coolers, the Windale 6 would be cooler, but this would result in the same noise out. Since the cooler isn't too much of a price jump from the Windale 4, it can still remain in the territory of being a recommendation of mine. The Windale 4 really does provide the better value and is a fantastic cooler, but so is this one. If you want slightly more thermal headroom for your CPU, then I would go with this solution. Not to mention, I do like the slick and stealthy aesthetics of the matte black color, which would suit a stealth build nicely. Both coolers output very low noise levels and both offer great values. The installation is the same for both, and that's really the only downside to them. Also, the fact that they only mount in an up-facing or down-facing position on the AM4 platform. I really love both coolers, but it comes down to what your situation is and what you need that makes one the better purchase over the other. Links for both Windale 4 and Windale 6 will be provided in the description below. Alright guys, well I hope you enjoyed the review and found it helpful. If you're new here and want to see more videos like this one, consider subscribing and checking out the rest of the channel. And thank you all for watching.